Way back in 1919, a young poet and critic named T.S. Eliot published an essay that was, well, basically a lightning rod for 20th century art. It was a full on attack on everything people thought they knew about creativity, genius, and what it even means to be an artist. So let's dive into his masterpiece, Tradition and the Individual Talent, and see how Eliot tried to build a whole new system for art out of the wreckage of the old world. All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. First, we need to get a handle on the problem Eliot was trying to solve. Then we'll unpack his two huge solutions, his new definition of tradition and his really wild theory about the artist. After that, we'll see just how massive an impact his ideas had, and finally, we'll see how they hold up today. To really get Eliot, you have to picture his world. We're talking right after World War I. The old certainties of the Victorian era, completely blown to pieces. Europe was a mess, and Eliot was searching for some kind of new order, a solid foundation for a very modern and very broken world. And to him, the way people were talking about art was just as chaotic. Literary criticism back then was all about the poet's biography. Seriously. To understand a poem, you were supposed to know about the poet's love life, their personal drama, what they ate for breakfast. For Eliot, this was just hopelessly messy and subjective. He wanted something different, something rigorous, almost scientific, that put the focus back on the art, not the artist. So this set up a major clash of ideas. On one side, you had 19th century Romanticism, where the big thing was sincere self-expression. The poem was basically a window into the poet's soul. But on the other side, you have Eliot's brand new modernism, arguing the exact opposite. He says, no, the focus has to be the poetry itself. It's an objective thing, something that's been crafted, and it should be analyzed with real rigor. Okay, so if you want an objective system for art, where do you even start? Eliot's first big move was to take the word tradition and flip it on its head. He wanted to rescue it from being this dusty, old-fashioned idea and turn it into something dynamic, powerful, and very much alive. And this quote, man, it gets right to the heart of his idea. For Eliot, tradition isn't something you're just born with. You don't get it because you're from a certain country. No, it's an achievement. You have to work for it, you have to study for it, and you have to earn it through a whole lot of effort. So the tool for getting this tradition is what he calls the historical sense. And this is not just about knowing history, it's about feeling it. It's this wild ability to write with the sense that Homer and Shakespeare are right there in the room with you, kind of looking over your shoulder. For him, the entire past of literature exists right now, all at once, in a single, unified system. So how does this system actually work? Think about all of literature as a perfectly balanced mobile hanging from the ceiling. That's what Eliot calls the existing monument. Now imagine a truly great new piece of art comes along. To add it to the mobile, every single other piece has to shift just a tiny bit to find a new balance. What that means is the present actually changes how we see the past, just as much as the past shapes the present. It's this living, breathing relationship. Okay, that brings us to Eliot's second solution, and this is the one that was, and still is, way more controversial. If tradition is this huge, powerful system, then what's the deal with the individual artist? This is where he drops his famous theory of impersonality. In what was a huge blow to the Romantics, Eliot just comes out and says it. The poet's job is not to express their personality. In fact, it's the opposite. The poet is just a medium, a neutral vessel that lets art happen. Their own life, their own feelings, that's just the raw material, not the point of the art itself. He uses this incredible analogy from chemistry to explain it. First, you've got your ingredients. These are the poet's own emotions, their experiences, their feelings, all the raw stuff of life. Then you have the catalyst. This is the poet's mind. Eliot compares it to a tiny shred of platinum in a chemical reaction. It is absolutely essential for the reaction to happen, but, and this is the whole point, it stays completely separate, totally neutral, and is unchanged by the process. As he put it, the man who suffers is different from the mind which creates. And the final result? A brand new compound, the poem. It's this objective thing, a work of art that now exists all on its own, completely separate from the personality of the artist who helped create it. The poem has its own life. And all this leads to his most explosive and unforgettable line. Poetry isn't about letting your feelings run wild. It's about getting away from them. It's not about showing the world who you are. It's a disciplined escape from yourself into the objective world of art. I mean, this was a complete and total revolution in how people thought about creativity. So what happens when you unleash ideas this radical onto the world? Well, they didn't just stay tucked away in some essay. They lit a fire that started a movement. And that movement completely took over how literature was taught and understood for decades. That movement was called New Criticism, and you can see Eliot's fingerprints all over its core beliefs. The idea that the text is autonomous, that it's an object you can study on its own. This led to the whole practice of close reading. You forget the author's biography, and you focus only on the words on the page. It also gave us two really famous concepts: the intentional fallacy, meaning who cares what the author meant to do, and the affective fallacy, meaning how the poem makes you feel doesn't determine if it's any good. And the influence here was just massive. For about 30 years, from the 1930s to the 60s, this was the way you learned to read poetry at a university. Eliot's essay wasn't just some opinion piece, it gave people a whole methodology that reshaped entire academic departments and trained generations of readers in this objective, rigorous way of thinking. But look, no theory is perfect, and no revolution lasts forever. And looking back from our modern perspective, scholars have found some pretty serious blind spots and challenges to Eliot's whole grand system. Probably the most famous takedown comes from the scholar Harold Bloom. Where Eliot sees this peaceful, harmonious surrender to tradition, Bloom sees an all-out war. He called it the anxiety of influence. For Bloom, young poets aren't humble servants, they're rebels, and they're locked in this epic psychological battle with their literary fathers, trying to create their own space by basically misreading and overcoming the past. And the critiques don't stop there. Scholars today point out that his idea of tradition is almost exclusively Western, male, and based on written works. That effectively pushes countless female writers to the side and completely ignores huge oral traditions from around the world. On top of that, by treating art as this pure, timeless object, his theory kind of ignores the real-world forces, politics, economics, power, that decide what art gets made and who gets to make it. So, after all that, where does that leave us with Eliot? Well, his undeniable legacy is that he forced us to take art seriously as a complex, crafted thing. He taught generations that a poem isn't just a diary entry with line breaks. No, it's a construction, and it demands our full attention and our sharpest thinking. And that brings us to one last, really provocative thought. I mean, we live in an age that is completely obsessed with the self, with personal brands, with sharing every single emotion online. In a world like that, is Eliot's century-old call for an escape from personality not just a theory of art anymore, but maybe the most radical thing an artist can even do? Definitely something to think about.